Apologies for the slight delay there. Hi, I am Graham Hughes. Welcome to tonight's show, which is going to be talking about my travels around the world. I have been sent a gargantuan list of questions to answer by a Argentinian journalist called Hughes, and I'm going to answer Hughes' question. He originally wanted me to write the answers, I think, but there's no way. There's not enough time left of the universe to answer all these questions by writing them all down. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna answer them. I'm gonna go through them. You can put in the chat if you want. In the chat, you can ask me questions as well. However, I am gonna try and stay to Hughes' questions. If you drop a super chat in, if you're so minded, I will just do the super chat animation. I won't acknowledge it till the very end because I want to just take the audio of what I'm saying and then give that audio to Hughes to make the article out of. Okay, everyone get it? All right, let's get started because I'm gonna have to get started because I've got 1 hour. I've got 1 hour and I've got to get through literally 57 questions. So yeah, and you know I'm quite garrulous at the best of times. So yeah, big shout out to Sarah in the chat there, UK Medic. We've also got Ian and Russell. If you'd like to join them in the chat, all you need to do is hit that little subscribe button underneath the video and you can join the chat. Right, okay, let's do this. I think that we might do another show where you get to ask me questions, but I think this will be a good base for it because obviously I'm going to be going through the basics of like why I did it and what inspired it and stuff like that. Now, I haven't actually read through all these questions yet. I've seen the first few, but I haven't read through them all. So I might answer a question earlier than I should, or I don't know, whatever. But we'll see. We'll see how I get on. Right. So let's do this. Hi, I am Graham Hughes. I'm going to start talking about my adventure to every country in the world without flying. The first question is, how did you come up with the adventure and when did you decide to do it? I remember specifically when I came up with this adventure, I was on top of a train in Ecuador, and I was writing out on in the back of my Lonely Planet guidebook to South America. I was writing out all the countries I'd been to up to that point, and there was like 70 countries or something, and most of them I got around without flying. So all around Europe I got to without flying. I've been around Southeast Asia. I sort of travelled around the Indian subcontinent. I traveled around Australia. I'd flown to get to these places, but once I was there, I had traveled around loads overland using trains and buses and driving. South America as well. I've been to I've been to nearly all the countries of South America, just traveling around. And without flying. I was also inspired by my travels as a kid. Like I didn't fly. I didn't get on a flight until I was about 14 years old, I think, when I went to visit my auntie and uncle in Denmark. Up to that point, if we went anywhere, if we traveled around Europe, it would always be in a car or a camper van. We never really flew as a family, and I really enjoyed the experience of overlanding it. And also, finally, there was a show in the 1980s when I was a little kid called Around the World in 80 Days. Michael Palin was the presenter. He was one of the guys from Monty Python's Flying Circus. And it was brilliant. And he had to go around the world in 80 days without flying. And it was a hell of a challenge. And I was thinking, well, someone's already probably gone to every country in the world. Flying, that's pretty easy. Relatively easy, I should say. But if you got the money. Yeah, doing it without flying, that would be something else. How old were you and what did you do before you set out? So I was 29 when I started the journey. I had studied history and politics at university. I didn't want to be a historian, didn't want to be a politician. So I had gone into filmmaking and I was it was a really good time to do it. It was a time when non-linear editing was suddenly available to just anyone with a PC and a digital camera. And I made music videos and actor show reels and short films and corporate videos and all kinds of stuff. And eventually I sold a couple of videos to Lonely Planet of my travels up to that point. And they liked these videos that I'd sent them. So I had a little bit of a relationship with Lonely Planet in Australia. I was in the UK at the time. And I pitched this idea. Of going to every country in the world without flying. And they were like, eventually, they were like, yeah, okay, let's see if it can be done. Let's do it. The next question is like, what's your studies and profession? We just covered that. What did your family think about it? They were incredibly mind-meltingly supportive. Like, I cannot fault my family for the support that they gave me during my trip. I don't think I would have been able to do it without them. They supported me every step of the way. They really did. It was absolutely phenomenal. they were as excited and joyous about doing this as I was. Is it true that your initial goal was to do it in 1 year? Yes. I naively thought that it would be possible to do it in 1 year. And do you know what? It ended up taking me 4 years and 31 days. That's what it says on my Guinness World Record certificate. It says 4 years and 31 days there. But I think that if you had unlimited resources, like if you were rich and you had people working for you, organizing your travel in the background, I think that it could definitely be done in a year. I honestly, I do believe that. However, we were doing it on a shoestring budget. Like, it wasn't, I didn't have a professional support team. It was my friends and family and then girlfriend Mandy who were helping me out. So, it was a bit of a task. It was a bit of a task. Why did you decide to start from Argentina? Because I didn't want to have to cross two major oceans. I thought, well, if I start in Argentina, I just have to cross the Atlantic, and then when I have to cross the Pacific, I'll only have to go as far as, say, New Zealand to going to the east. So I could start in Argentina, in South America, go across to Uruguay, and then up to Paraguay, and then Bolivia, etc. I could go push north through South America, through the Caribbean, Central America, North America, and then I would be going east for most of the journey, sort of making a big sine curve around the world. That was my plan when I got started. Hang on. Is it true that you left your country in the new year? Well, I started the adventure on New Year's Day, January the 1st, 2009, from Buenos Aires in Argentina. I crossed over the River Plate, the Rio Plata, into a place called Colonia in Uruguay, and that was my first entry stamp. That was my first official border crossing of the journey. And funnily enough, everything was closed in Uruguay on January the 1st. It was a public holiday, so I had to get back on the Berca bus, I think it was called. The name of the boat was the Berca bus. I had to get back on that, go back to Buenos Aires, and to continue my journey from there because I couldn't travel through Uruguay until the next day if I had stayed. So yeah, what transport did you use to move between countries and continents? Okay, so between countries, it was nearly always buses. All around the Americas, it was buses pretty much. Around Europe, I used trains mostly. Around Africa, I used bush taxis. Some buses in the north of the country, some in the south of the continent, some in the north of the continent, some of the south of the continent. But when I was traveling around places like, in West Africa, Guinea, Liberia, Sierra Leone, that was all bush taxis. It was all set plus taxis and things like that. I also managed to get rides on, 18-wheelers, on big lorries that took passengers for some reason. You had to pay. It wasn't like hitchhiking or anything. So that was how I got around on land. It was generally that. And I wasn't allowed to drive myself. It was a Guinness World Record rule that I wasn't allowed to drive myself, and I wasn't allowed to sort of hitchhike. I had to take scheduled ground transport, as they call it, because they can't sanction a road race, and they didn't want me getting in a car and driving too fast to complete the journey faster. I mean, it took me 4 years, so it's a bit silly that they're saying, oh. And actually, at one point, I remember I was traveling through Nigeria, and I tried to bribe the driver of this minibus I was in. They call them maulers because they get smashed up so often. I was trying to bribe him to slow down. So if there's any bribery going on, it was to make my record take longer rather than shorter, but at least get me there in one piece. Between continents, between North America and Europe, I took a cargo ship between there, and then that was the only time really between continents that I had to take a cargo ship. But I did have to take subsequent ships everywhere. Like the Caribbean has hardly any scheduled transport ferries between the countries of the Caribbean. So it was a mix of the ferries, which there are a few of, cargo ships. I managed to catch rides to hitch a ride on a cargo ship, which was permitted because they can't break the speed limit or something. I managed to get rides on sailing boats, and also at one point I did manage to get onto a cruise ship that was leaving the US Virgin Islands for Dominican Republic. So yeah, I managed to blag my way on that with a little help from my friends back in the UK. So yeah, a combination of all those transports really. Just anything but a plane and a helicopter, I guess. Why did you decide not to use the plane? I've sort of answered this a little bit earlier, but I thought it'd be more of a challenge. I also was very aware of the carbon footprint that I would be leaving if I flew to all these places, and I would feel eternally awful if I travelled as far as Tuvalu in the Pacific Ocean, which is critically endangered because of the rising tides caused by climate change, climate collapse. If I turned up on a plane, and so I felt like it was, if I was going to do this and I was going to travel this way, it would be not just like, morally the right thing to do, but also for me, I just thought it'd be better experience. And it really was, because I hate flying. I'm not scared of flying. It's not like I don't like being in the air. I quite like it, actually. What I don't like is airports, is being scanned and patted down, and just the having to stand in a queue for 3 hours with your backpack on to get your stamp and to go through security. It's so dehumanizing, and no one talks to each other. And one of the things about public transport is, I was traveling alone, but you're never alone for long. There's always someone who wants to have a chat with you. So yeah, I like the idea of doing this. And also, finally, no one had done it before. I don't even think anyone had even tried to do it before I did it. And in fact, when I took this idea to the Guardian newspaper in the UK, they said they seemed to think it was impossible. They thought it couldn't be done. And it was interesting going to Lonely Planet and saying, this is what I want to do. This is what I intend to do. And they were like, what makes you think this is possible? And I had an ace card up my sleeve, which was, I said, well, I've read all your books, and basically I've gleaned all this information from your travel books. So if your travel books are accurate, then I can do this. And they were like, ooh, quite impressed. So yeah, they gave me the backing to make a TV show of my first year of the journey. Did you agree with Guinness which vehicles you could use and which ones you could not use? Yeah, I absolutely did. So things I could use were anything on the sea, basically. So fishing boats, sailing boats. It could be a private sailing boat, that didn't matter. It could be a cargo ship, cruise ship, whatever I could try and get on board. That was fine. On land, it had to be scheduled public transport, but there was a little proviso here that, let's be realistic, if you're in West Africa, they have these taxis called transport called Sept Place taxis, like 7 places in French, Sept Place. And they're supposed to have 7 passengers, but they took like 14 or maybe 15 on a goat, and they were all squeezed in like sardines, and they will go when they were full. So you would wait for 2 hours, 3 hours or something until this car filled up, and once it was full, you would go. So it was kind of scheduled, like you knew it was going to leave that day, but the actual time it would leave was very variable. But that was all allowed. Buses and trains, obviously. I couldn't take a taxi more than, I think it was 100 kilometers. And that was just to cover me when I was in a city or something, to make sure that it was safe. Because one of the things that I might come to later, if I haven't read the rest of the questions, but I always had it in my head that other people might try and replicate what I've done and try and do it faster. And I didn't want them to put themselves in unnecessary danger to try and achieve this record. So tried to do it as safely as possible. How much money did you have? Ooh, not much. I think it worked out to about £120, which is about $150. So $150 a week. And that had to cover my transport, my food, my accommodation, my drinks, my visas, my bribes that I had to pay in West Africa and places. I usually get tapped for a bribe every few miles along the way. And I mean, the whole journey cost, I worked it out at the end, it cost about 28,000 British pounds. That was over 4 years of travel. And yeah, I was doing it on a shoestring. I was taking public transport everywhere, which is pretty cheap most places in the world. I was couch surfing, so I was staying with local people everywhere. I wasn't necessarily, when I was in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, I actually stayed at a friend's. We went to a friend's house party, who I knew from back in Liverpool. She was Argentinian. So it was like everywhere I went, I either had people, there were people I knew, I had friends there already, or I made new friends. And that kept the cost down a lot. I mean, one of the one of the big expenses of travel is really really accommodation. So being able to couch surf and stay anywhere for free, that was phenomenal. And you get to see a side of the city or the town or the country that you're in that you wouldn't necessarily get to see otherwise. So that was pretty cool. Did you keep your savings, or did you work in the different countries? I couldn't work. It would be a bit naughty if I worked in these different countries. So no, I'd saved up some money. I got some money for making the TV show, not much, I have to say. And then so maybe I'll say like I saved a third. A third came from the TV show, and then a third was on my credit cards. And it wasn't until quite a while after the journey had finished that I'd actually managed to pay that off. How long were you in Argentina? Well, on this particular journey, I think I was in Argentina for just 3 days. But about 7 years earlier, I had spent a good couple of weeks in Argentina, traveled around Argentina. I've been to Buenos Aires, I've been to Mendoza, I've been to Cordoba. I've been up to the Foz de Iguazu, the big Iguazu falls, which are on the border with Argentina and Brazil, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. One of my favorite countries, actually, Argentina. So that really, really fun. Did you only visit Buenos Aires? On this journey, no. Well, I traveled up from Buenos Aires up to the border with Paraguay, and then I came down back into Argentina, and I traveled across to San Salvador de Jujuy. And then from there, I went north to Bolivia. So it was over 3 days. What do you think of the country and its people? Well, like I said, I loved it. I mean, I really, really enjoy Latin America at the best of times. Central America and South America. Really, really fun, vibrant, interesting countries. They all have their own flavor. They all have this really great, sort of like a joyous spirit. And they've got great food. And one of the big joys of travel is food. So I'd recommend Argentina. I'm not just sucking up. I would genuinely recommend it for people to go and visit. Tell me what professions you took with you, and if you have any anecdotes. I don't know if I've got any anecdotes. I'll have to think about that. But my impression of Argentinian people was just they were very warm and welcoming and curious. People asked what I was doing, why I was doing this. Which is great, because in Europe, I've got to say, like a lot of places, people just don't care. People don't even look at you, So having someone take an interest in what you're doing and why you're doing it is brilliant. And I'll tell you a little anecdote, actually. So one of the first buses I needed to get, I was going from the Paraguayan border to San Salvador de Jujuy, I think. And I'd got a bus to the nearest town. And I had a little GPS tracker with me, and I left it on the bus. And the guys at the bus station managed to get it back for me within like a couple of hours, so I could continue on my journey, because the bus has already turned around and headed back to the border. And that was absolutely phenomenal and above and beyond the call of duty. And the guys were so really, really sweet, really, really nice. And it was the kind of, I don't know. I don't know if you get that kind of help in other places, especially being European myself, and people can be quite standoffish in Europe. Like, people don't necessarily talk to you on public transport, don't necessarily want to help you out if it's a big hassle for them. But in Argentina and other countries around Latin America, people kind of fall over themselves to help you out, which is wonderful. Actually, I've got to say, everywhere, pretty much everywhere I went to, all around Africa, all around Asia, people, they just helped out. Just really lovely. How many countries and continents did you visit in the first year? So continents: South America, North America, Europe, Africa. So 4 continents, and I went to 133 countries. 130. That was all the countries of the Americas, all the countries of Europe, except for Cyprus and Turkey, and all the countries of Africa, apart from Sudan, Eritrea, Libya, and Algeria. So that was all of the countries that I managed to get to in the first year of 133. Did something happen to you in Cuba? No, nothing happened to me in Cuba that was bad or anything, but it was really hard to get to Cuba because at the time, and I think probably still now, they had a travel embargo or something from America, and I didn't realize this. I'd watched this movie, a film by Michael Moore called Sicko, which was about the American healthcare system, and in that he went down to Florida and he jumps on a speedboat and he goes over to Cuba, no problem. And I thought I could do that. And then I got to Florida and I realized, no, you can't do that. Because if I jump on someone's boat and they take me to Cuba and then they come back to America, they can be in so much trouble when they get back because they've violated this law called the Trading with the Enemy Act or something of, I don't know, the early 1900s. And they can get a fine. They could lose their ship. They could lose their boat. I think they could even go to jail if they've gone over to Cuba without express permission from the American government. And I applied for permission from the American government to go over there with an American, and the American government said no. They denied my application. So in the end, I had to. I managed to find someone who was leaving America forever. They weren't coming back. They were relocating to Fiji on their sailboat, and they were leaving Florida the next day, which was convenient. And they said, yeah, I'll drop off in Cuba along the way, and then we'll go to Cancun in Mexico. So that's what we did. That's exactly what we did. And Cuba was amazing. Cuba was lovely. I'd love to go back there and spend more time. I only ended up spending a day there. But if I could go back to Cuba, I'll be a very happy bunny if I could go back to Cuba. Did you have a program on Nat Geo during your trip? Yeah, so Nat Geo Adventure screened my show, which was called Lonely Planet's The Odyssey. It's also known as Graham's World. There was one series made, 8 episodes. It covered the first year of my travels. It was produced by Lonely Planet Television. It was commissioned by National Geographic, and it was distributed, well, it still is distributed by BBC Worldwide. So it's been shown in about 80 countries, I think, around the world, but it's never been shown in the UK. So it's been shown in all these countries, but not mine. Anyway, did you also produce a documentary with your experience of your first year? Yeah, that was the show for National Geographic. It was the same thing. Were you kidnapped? No, I wasn't kidnapped. I went to jail a couple of times, but I wasn't kidnapped. No. Why were you kidnapped? I wasn't kidnapped. How did you manage to escape? I wasn't kidnapped. Did you feel fear at any point during any other point during your journey? So I think what you might be referring to here is when I got arrested, not kidnapped, but arrested. And the first time I had taken a fishing boat, a pirogue, a 40-foot wooden boat, like a long boat, like a canoe, 40-foot canoe with 10 Senegalese fishermen from Dakar, and I'd taken it over the sea to Praia, the capital of the Cape Verde Islands, Portuguese-speaking islands in the Atlantic Ocean, and 650 kilometers over open ocean in this leaky wooden boat that had no radio, no sat phone, no distress beacons or anything. We turned up, and the authorities were supposed to be told that we were coming, but there was a muck up with the translation, I guess, and they read it as a tip-off rather than permission. We weren't giving a tip off. We were asking for permission to do this, to let them know that it was us that we were coming in. And we ended up spending 6 days in a jail cell under a police station in Praia, and that was pretty miserable. We were in these cells, and we only had one cell each. We had one cell for all 11 of us, and there was no bed. You had to sleep on the concrete floor for 5 nights. So that wasn't much fun. But I ended up getting out, and the fishermen were flown back to Senegal, and I was allowed to stay and find alternative means to get back to Africa mainland, and also get their pirogue back as well, because they wouldn't let us take it back. They said it was unseaworthy, which it probably was. And then the second time I was in Congo, I got into the capital Brazzaville, and I they didn't like the look of me. I don't know. They wanted to see all my videos on my camera. Back in those days, they were on little mini DV tapes like that. We got all the way. I got arrested. They commandeered a car and put me in the back of this car that this poor guy had to then drive to the police station. I was kept in the police station overnight, and then the next night I was taken to another police station, and I was stripped of my clothes apart from my jeans. They took my belt, my shoes, socks. They took my glasses, and they put me in a cell for I think it was 4 nights spent in that cell. And yeah, that was pretty grim. And the scariest bit was when some diplomats came to help me out. I can't say who it was for reasons of diplomacy. And one of the diplomats spoke to me as I was, in my cell, and said, "Listen, Graham, you really need to stop shouting and bashing the door with your feet, and being obnoxious, because they'll make it look like an accident. I.e., if I continue carrying on like this, they could, dispatch me." So yeah, that scared me. That actually made me sit up and pay attention. What other strange things happened to you? Oh my God, so many strange things. One of the strangest was like the coincidences that took place during my journey. I mean, one of the maddest ones was like, I ran into, I didn't run into, I managed to get a lift on a cruise ship. I managed to get a free lift on a cruise ship that was going from New Zealand to Australia. And on the first night in there, I'm going to one of the restaurants. There's like 7 restaurants on board. I go to one of the restaurants and they say, "Do you want to sit on your own, or do you want to join a table of other solo passengers?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I'll join the other solo passengers. That sounds like fun." So I go and join this table, and I think there's about like 8 people around this round table. And the woman to my right, I swear, she says hello. I say hello. She goes, "Oh, are you from Liverpool?" And she says it in a very Liverpool accent. And I said, yes, I am. She's like, "Oh, I'm from Liverpool too. Whereabouts?" I said, "West Derby." And she said, "I'm from West Derby too. Whereabouts in West Derby?" And I said, "Oh, my parents live off this particular road." And she's like, "I literally live on that road." I'm like, "You're kidding me." And I gave her the number of my parents. It's like, she was like a few doors down from the same road on this cruise ship on the other side of the planet. It was just like mind-blowing. There were so many experiences that happened on that journey. So many amazing bits of coincidental, just luck, I guess, dumb luck, that allowed me to finish the journey. Because don't forget, if one country said no, you can't come in, I couldn't have done it. I could have gone to 190 countries and then one of them says no, and that's it. That's the whole record in the bin. But one of the other things I found was like, it really helps that you put yourself out there and you make sure that you go and talk to people. So 2 things. First of all, I learned quite quickly while trying to get lifts on boats around the Caribbean that you're not just asking for a lift like you would hitchhiking in a car. These are people's homes. They live. You're essentially saying to some strangers, "Hey, can I live with you for a couple of days while we go to the next island, St. Martin or whatever?" And so I learned very quickly that you have to make friends. It's a bit of a process. It's not just sticking your thumb out. You have to make an effort. You have to go out and have a meal, have drinks, and get to know them and get to know the people who own the boat. And eventually they might go, "Yeah, all right, come on board." And one of the other sort of just mad coincidences that always sticks in my head. So I just got into Dubai, and it was the weekend there, which is Friday, Saturday. So their weekend is Friday and Saturday. So it was Friday night, and I was staying with a friend of mine from the UK, who was from Manchester, who's living in Dubai. And first night there, he says, "Come on, let's go out and have some drinks." So in Dubai, you can get alcohol, but it's always in a hotel. So we were down in this, I think there's a club called Rock Bottom, and it was under a hotel, essentially, so they could have a drinks license. And there was one pool table, and there were a couple of guys playing pool. And they played a game, finished, and I went over and said, "Do you mind if we play doubles? Do you want to play doubles?" And one of the guys who was playing was British, and he's like, "Oh yeah, sure, no problem." So we're playing doubles with these two guys we just met, and one of them says, "You look familiar. Where are you from? Are you on the TV or something?" And at the time, my TV show, Lonely Planets: The Odyssey, was on TV in Dubai. So and it was one of the few English language channels. So a lot of expats, a lot of immigrants, English immigrants and American immigrants had seen it. So they knew who I was vaguely. And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I'm that guy. I'm going to every country in the world without flying." He's like, "Oh my God, that's amazing. What are you doing in Dubai?" And I said, well, I've made quite a good relationship with the shipping company CMA CGM, who are a French shipping company. They've allowed me on a few of their ships already. Basically, they've got a ship that goes from here, it goes to Pakistan, it goes to India. If I can get on that, visit Pakistan, visit India, get off in India, that'll be absolutely brilliant. It's called the Epic Line. It goes once a month, and like I'd love to be able to get on that. But I just need to talk to the logistics manager for CMA CGM here in Dubai. And this guy is like, you're not going to believe this. And he pulls out his business card and gives it to me. And it says, Barry Dinage, logistics manager, CMA CGM Dubai. And I'm like, you are shitting me. But that actually happened. So yeah, mad things happen because, just sometimes the stars align. What can I say? How did you manage to get into those countries that were difficult to access, such as North Korea? So North Korea was fairly easy, comparatively. There's two ways of doing it. There's a company that operates out of Beijing. They take the train in. It's called Young Pioneers Tours. And you stay for a few days and you get a guided tour around Pyongyang. I didn't want to do that because A, it was very expensive. I mean, it would smash my budget for weeks. But B, I also felt I didn't want to be giving money to the North Korean regime. So what I did was, and I checked with Guinness World Records that this was okay before I did it, I went to the demilitarized zone and went on a day trip there. And what you can do in the demilitarized zone, they've got the border and they have these, what they call peace huts that straddle the border. And they've got a table in each one. So when down the middle is the border between the two countries. So when they're negotiating things between North and South, they're not in each other's territory because the line goes between, along the middle of the table. And as a tourist, you are allowed to walk around the table. So that's what I did. I walked around the table, got a sneaky little selfie picture of myself on the South Korean side, and then ticked it off. One of the things that we discussed with Guinness, or I discussed with Guinness before I started, was that there wasn't a minimum amount of time that I needed to spend in a place, and it wasn't a minimum amount of distance I needed to go into a place. A good example for this would be Vatican City, the Holy See. It is a country, but like it's tiny and you can't really spend the night there, I don't think, unless you sleep there or whatever. So yeah, I felt like it would be a bit mad to have to do that. And also there were some countries that were really dangerous, like Somalia, really dangerous place. I didn't want to anyone who tried to break my record in the future, I didn't want them putting them in harm's way. So I made it so that if you just wanted to step over the border, get the stamp necessarily in your passport, and then turn around, walk back out again, as long as you could prove that you crossed the border, then it would count. So I did that in Somalia. I did it in Yemen. There was about a dozen countries where I literally just stepped over the border and came straight back because it was for me, this was fun. This wasn't something that I was prepared to die for or get kidnapped for. So it was a Guinness World Record that I could try and set while still having fun at the same time and meeting people. Which country was the most difficult for you to enter? It was the Seychelles in the Indian Ocean. The reason being, at the time, it was the height of the Somali pirate situation, and I couldn't get insurance to go on a cargo ship, and there were no cruise ships going around. There were no yachts. There was a sailing couple who were kidnapped in 2009, like while I was traveling around that area, and they were held for like a year. So there were no sailboats there. It was really, really difficult to get to the Seychelles, but I did manage to get them. And they were like my last but one country as a result of it being so difficult to get there. In fact, when we think about difficult countries to get into, we tend to think of places like Iraq or Afghanistan or North Korea. They're not that difficult. If you got the money, there's a border. You can cross the border at some point. The really difficult countries to get to are places like Nauru in the Pacific Ocean, which are a little tiny island nation that only have a supply ship that comes once a month. And if you don't get on that supply ship, you're not visiting Nauru. So yeah, they were the hard ones to enter. Where did you have the worst time? Well, I don't know. I don't want to say. I mean, I going to jail in Cape Verde was pretty crap. I've got to say. But also, after I got out of Cape Verde jail, I was stuck there for 6 weeks. And, I didn't have a terrible time. Congo, I was in jail for 6 days in Congo, and then they let me go without charge. So that was probably the worst experience in Congo. But You know what? I mean, the other people I met while I was traveling through Congo were really nice and kind and generous. I don't have anything against the country in particular. It's just that I didn't have a particularly good experience there. Where did you have the best time? Oh, so many best times. That's unfair. You can't ask me that question. So the best times, there were just times when things just sort of came together. I was in El Salvador for my 30th birthday, and I was in an Irish pub, and a couple of the local guys befriended me. We went to a sushi bar, then we went out to a beach party. There was a beach party going on just outside of San Salvador City, and that was how I saw my 30th birthday come in. And then I spent my actual birthday traveling in a bus down to Costa Rica through various countries. I had a fantastic time in Indonesia. I had a fantastic time in Thailand. I had a fantastic time in Hong Kong. I had a really good time in Australia, New Zealand, Fiji. Even in places where I was kind of like trapped for a little while. Like I was stuck in Kuwait for 6 weeks waiting for a visa so I could travel through Saudi Arabia. But I still managed to have a really good time while I was there. And the one country that really sticks out, and you might ask me about this later, but I'm going to answer it now. The one that really stuck out was Iran, because it was the friendliest country by a mile, and then a lot of countries were friendly. So, that's really putting it above everything else. And everywhere I went, I just got adopted by people who were like, oh my God, you're traveling on your own, because you don't get many Western tourists traveling around Iran, especially not on their own, usually part of a tour group. So that was unique. That was interesting for people. And my favorite story of all when I was traveling is that I was on an overnight bus from a place called Shiraz going over to a place called Khurramshahr in Iran. I was an overnight bus, little Persian grandmother sitting in front of me, gave me her mobile phone, and I answered it. I said, hello. And the guy on the other end, perfect English, said, hello, my name is Saeed. You are, you are sitting behind my grandmother. And this little sweet old lady sort of smiling and waving to me between the seats. And Saeed says, she wanted me to talk to you because she's concerned about you. And I said, well, why is she concerned? And he said, because she says the bus gets in very early tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. and everywhere will be closed. And she's worried that you won't have anywhere to go and no one to make you breakfast. So if she wants to know if it's okay with you if she takes you home with her and makes you breakfast. Faith in humanity restored. So yeah, absolutely the best. If you want to, I know things are difficult around the world at the moment, and there are some proper horrible people in power, but actually the vast majority of people are good. They've got a good heart and they want the best for everyone, really. It's just unfortunately they're not the people in power. Did you return to the UK at any point? Yeah, I came back a couple of times actually. So the first time I came back was because I had to visit the UK, and I regarded England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland as 4 separate countries in their own right, or nations, I should say, four separate nations in their own right. So I did that and the Republic of Ireland all in one day. I called it the five nations pub crawl, and then I came back in February 2010. I overlanded it back from Turkey because I needed to get visas for Algeria and Libya. And I surprised my parents and my family. They didn't know I was coming home, and they were having dinner, and we set up a Skype call. And I was actually upstairs. My brother had let me into the house in secret, and I was actually upstairs. I had my whole family there. And, I come down the stairs. I'm like, hello. I need to get a better signal. So I'm walking with my laptop, down the stairs. And I'm like, that background looks familiar. So yeah, I did that. And then in 2011, in a way, this is when the wheels kind of came off my journey, because I got really, really shocking news just before Christmas 2010 that my sister had been diagnosed with cancer, and I didn't know how aggressive it was going to be or how bad it was going to be, but cancer's generally never a good thing. And I at that point I was in Papua New Guinea. I'd been to 184 countries without flying. I didn't have that many more to go, but I just was like, I've got to go home. So what I did was I flew to Australia, and I had a girlfriend in Australia at the time, and I was in Australia for a few weeks until we found out, what the situation was with my sister Nikki. But then, we got the information that it was terminal, And so at that point, I flew back to the UK and spent the last few weeks of my sister's life, visiting her at the hospice, and that was really difficult. That was probably the worst time of the journey. Well, it was the worst time. It was one of the worst times of my life, to be honest with you. But and then I flew back to Australia, and the wind had gone out my sails, but I had promised my sister that I wouldn't stop because of her, and I felt like I had to fulfill that promise, to actually finish the journey. So yeah, I did that, and then I had spoken to Guinness World Records beforehand. Obviously, I've said this, but I'd said if I need to go home for a family emergency or because I'm ill or something, can I fly? And they were like, yes, as long as you go back to the exact spot you left off, as long as you don't fly as part of the journey, yes, you can fly in those circumstances. So they'd given me special permission to do this. And then I had to do it again a year later. I was in Sri Lanka. I'd organised to take a ship that was coming down from Europe down to Australia for the winter season in October, and it was like, I don't know, July. It was like July, August. So I knew I was going to be stuck in Sri Lanka for a few months, and my dad was going in for a heart operation. And at the time, we didn't know if he was going to pull through it or anything. So I flew home again, spent a few weeks back in the UK with my family, and then once he'd had his operation and everything had gone okay, flew back to Sri Lanka where I'd left off and continued on with the journey. So they were the times that I came home during the trip. Did you think about leaving the adventure at any point? Yeah, when my sister died. But at that time, I only had 16 countries left to visit. And then that summer, the summer of 2011, South Sudan became a country. So it went up to 17, had 17 countries. I'd already been to every country in Africa, all 53 countries of Africa at that time. And I had to go back to get to the 54th. In the second year, how did you get to know Middle Eastern countries? Oh, very, very well. I spent a lot of time in the Middle East. I told the story about Iran. I spent a few weeks in Egypt. I traveled through Jordan. I spent a few days in Iraq, in the north of Iraq, in the Kurdish region of Kurdistan in Iraq, which was really fun. What was your impressions of the Middle East? I really enjoyed it. I really, really enjoyed it. Some places I enjoyed more than others. I really enjoyed Egypt. I've always enjoyed Egypt. I think it was like the fourth or fifth time I'd visited Egypt at that point, and it's a really special place for me. I was actually in Egypt during the Millennium celebrations back when 1999 became the year 2000. I was at the pyramids for a Jean-Michel Jarre concert. There you go. But yes, I really enjoyed the Middle East. Although Iran was nothing like what I expected it to be. It was a lot more friendly. The people there were really beautiful and kind. Saudi Arabia was very much like I expected it to be. I was on edge the whole time I was there because I didn't want to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing or look at the wrong thing. And it's like, I didn't enjoy that, trying to be on your best behavior all the time. And it's not fun. It's really not fun. But then, there's other places where I guess, things are quite strict, but you can still have a good time. I really enjoyed Oman in particular. I spent a couple of weeks in Salalah in Oman, which is near the border with Yemen. And I was trying to get on a ship at that time to the Seychelles. And there was just no cargo ships for taking anyone because of the Somali pirate situation. The last 2 years, according to your website, the most difficult. Why? Well, one, my sister died. Two, I had to get to these last 17 countries, 16 of which were islands. They were islands. So it was trying to get to Tuvalu, Kiribati, the Marshall Islands, Palau, Nauru, Vanuatu, Samoa, Tonga, Fiji. And these places are just out of the way. The Marshall Islands, they are very, very difficult to get to. Whereas in the Caribbean, the islands are so close to each other, you can sail from one to the next in just one day. You can see the lights of the next nation on the horizon. In the Pacific, you're talking like 1,000 miles, 1,000 kilometers to get from one country to another. And I was completely at the mercy of the shipping timetables for the cargo ships that go around there. But I also managed to get on a couple of cruise ships, which allowed me to tick a few countries off. But that was particularly difficult, logistically speaking. And also, I had to put on the charm to try and get onto these cargo ships. I turned up at the shipping officers with a bottle of Johnny Walker Red Label, and I was like, you know, can I get on your ship? So yeah, that was tricky. And again, you lose a bit of agency because when you are in control of what buses you get or what trains you get, or that's fine. But when you're asking someone permission to get on their vessel in order to get to that country, and if they say no, you have no way of getting to that country. There's no plan B. It really does put the strain on it. So that's why the last 17 countries just took so long. And it also included the Seychelles, which I've already mentioned, the Maldives, and it also included Sri Lanka, which I'd skipped on the way down to Papua New Guinea just because I had tried to get to them from... I tried to get to the Seychelles from Madagascar. I tried to get there from Kenya. I tried to get there from Oman. I tried to get to the Maldives from India, and I couldn't even get from India to Sri Lanka. There's no shipping. There's no ferry from one to the other. So that was a bit of a nightmare. So yeah, they were the most difficult. Which country did you visit? All of them. I'll send you a list. Ask me for the list. I'll send you them. Did you find it difficult to enter South Sudan? No, I didn't. South Sudan, again, it's a country surrounded by other countries. So I just literally went to Uganda. I applied for a visa for South Sudan in Uganda, and they let me in. So that was pretty simple. What was country 197? So the Guinness World Record is for 197, but I was counting it as 201 because I counted I counted a few extra countries that Guinness don't count. So originally my plan was to go to 200 countries, and that meant the UK was split into 4. So it was England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and it also included Western Sahara or Spanish Sahara, which was not generally included in their list. The last country was supposed to be South Sudan. 201 countries, done it. I did loads of interviews, went on the BBC, did loads of articles about my travels and everything for newspapers. I spoke to the people on CNN. And then I got back to the UK and I wrote off to Guinness saying, right, what evidence do you need? And they got back to me and said, listen, we're not going to accept your record. And I said, what? And said, well, because you went to Russia illegally. You didn't cross an official border post. And I'm thinking, oh, bloody hell, what? So like one of the 200 countries that I went to, one of the 201 countries I went to, they weren't happy with the way that I crossed. I was like, I went there 4 years ago. You could have told me this 4 years ago. So I then happily, I had actually overlanded it back from South Sudan, which was difficult because the border between North Sudan or Sudan and South Sudan is closed. So I had to go south into Uganda. Then I had to go into Ethiopia and try and get a visa into Sudan, which was difficult because they weren't happy with the fact I'd gone to South Sudan, and it takes a long time to get a visa from Khartoum in Sudan anyway. Addis Ababa. No, can't get a visa for a country in a country, can you? I was trying to get it in Addis Ababa, the capital of Ethiopia, and it just took it was taking quite a long time. Ethiopia is fantastic, by the way. Fantastic food, lovely people, so I managed to get a visa and then travel into Sudan, then up into Egypt. And then and then this was after the Arab Spring. This was after the civil war had started in Syria, and it meant that I couldn't overland it through Syria like I'd done the first time I'd done that route. So I had to take a ship, a passenger ferry from Egypt, from Port Said, over to a place called Iskenderun in Turkey. And then I travelled up through Turkey to the UK. And because I'd done it all overland, I could technically continue the journey from there. So I had Christmas and New Year with my family, and then at the end of January, I travelled to Kaliningrad, which is an exclave of Russia, and I spent the night there, and then got officially stamped in and stamped out. I got escorted out by the army. I don't think I'm going to be returning to Russia anytime soon. During the adventures, did you make friends or lovers? Well, I made lots of friends. I made lots and lots and lots of friends along the way. Yeah. As for others, no comment. Do you remember, or do you still see any of them? Yeah, I see loads of them. Like loads of people who I stayed with on my adventures. I'm still in contact with through Facebook. I've seen them since my travels. After my travels, I won an island in a game show, and quite a few people who I had stayed with while I was traveling came to Panama, to this island that I had, to stay with me on the island. So yeah, brilliant. Which is, according to your experience, the most beautiful country in the world? Oh, I hate questions like this because it feels like I'm being mean to other countries, that they aren't the most beautiful for whatever reason. And honestly, my opinion changes depending on what day it is. um, there are some phenomenally beautiful countries out there. I mean, look, if you like the deserts, obviously you've got countries that have got, the Sahara Desert, and if you want to see the stars, it's the best place for it. That's beautiful. But then if you want lush tropical interiors, then you go to some equatorial countries, and they're absolutely beautiful. And one thing that sticks in my mind actually is traveling through Colombia, and the fact that they have the Andes, the northern Andes up there, and they're all covered in trees. They're all covered in green. It's like seeing these massive mountains. You don't expect them to have trees that high up, but they do, which I always loved. But it's a very difficult question to answer that on the most beautiful country. Some places have beautiful people. Some places have beautiful landmarks. Some places have beautiful scenery. Difficult. I would say my sort of favorite experience, I guess, if I'm going to talk about just something being absolutely out of this world beautiful, would be Palau in the Pacific Ocean. And they have an area there called the Rock Islands. It's a national park. I think it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, actually. I'll have to look that up. But you go out, and it's these rocks in the water, and all the rocks are covered in green. They're all covered in trees and vegetation, and they look amazing. It doesn't look like anything from reality. It looks like something from Avatar or something. And on one of the bigger islands, they've got a lake in the middle of the island, and it's filled with jellyfish. It's known as Jellyfish Lake, and the jellyfish don't sting, which is amazing. So it means that you can swim in this water with like millions of jellyfish that do not sting. So you can push them gently if they're coming a bit too close to you. You can just push them away, and they kind of bump into you. And I think they make their energy through photosynthesis. I'm one of the few animals on the planet that make their energy through sunlight. And that was just an out of the world experience. And Palau, it hasn't been messed up by mass tourism, or at least it hadn't when I was there. The unspoilt beauty of it was just amazing. You think of turquoise waters with these rock islands, uninhabited, left to nature, and these amazing coral reefs. And it was just, I'm going to go with Palau, but I might change my mind tomorrow. Which is, according to your experience, the most pleasant country to live in? Oh, I don't know. I would, if you'd asked me that question about 15 years ago, I might have been tempted to say the UK, but I don't want to say that anymore because it's not as pleasant as it used to be. It really isn't. I think a lot of countries that I liked in the past have now got a hardened edge to them. Some people in charge are not very nice. They don't want people to travel the world. They don't want people to experience what they can experience, because all the people in charge are rich and they like to experience these things, but they don't want people like me or you experiencing the same thing. So they've put things in place to make travel more difficult, to make it more difficult to get out, to make it more difficult to take a year out to travel. Just they made life more difficult. So the most pleasant country to live in, I don't know. I've lived in the UK, I've lived in Panama, I've lived in Australia. I don't know. I couldn't really answer that at the moment. All countries have their good points, and all countries have their negative points. Is there any culture or country that's particularly surprised you in terms of hospitality? Yes, Iran. See my earlier story. What is your final reflection on the experience? It was amazing. Like, it changed my view. It changed me. It changed me as a person. Like, I used to be a bit more, I don't know, a little less, I always thought like the world wasn't as bad as it's sort of made out on the news and everything, because we only get like, bad news stories, don't we? We never hear like something nice happened in West Africa today. It's always like, oh no, there's been a plane crash, there's been an earthquake, there's flooding, and so we get this kind of distorted view of the world that it's sort of like a nasty place where everyone's out to get you. But the reality is they're not. And I I came back from this journey with an incredibly positive view of humanity, and I didn't get anything robbed. I didn't get beaten up. I didn't get mugged. I didn't get ill. I didn't get ill for 4 years and a month. I didn't get ill. And I took all the precautions that I needed to. I wasn't particularly foolhardy, but I managed to have a good time everywhere I went. There were people who wanted to share things with me, wanted to share their food or share some good times, or share their home if they were letting me stay with them through couch surfing. So it was that, and it was also a humbling experience. I know this is going to sound a bit cliche and a bit cheesy, but it really was, because it made me appreciate the how big the world is, but also how small the world is, and how precious the world is, and how lucky we are to be alive in it now, when we have the technology, the ability to travel like this and see the world and visit these places that our ancestors never had. That they couldn't do the kind of things that we could do, and we take it for granted a lot of the time. And I always feel like there's a famous expression, which apparently was said by Mark Twain, but I'd have to check on that, which is that travel is fatal to prejudice. And I really do feel that way about what my experience. I mean, I hadn't really traveled around Africa much before I did this journey. I've been to Morocco, I've been to Egypt, and that was about it. I think I've been to Tunisia, but I hadn't actually traveled to sub-Saharan Africa, and I did have a bit of trepidation before doing it, because I didn't know what to expect. I mean, all I hear about countries in West Africa and Central Africa is, they're always at war, and there's always bad things going on, and there's a famine, and there's a fight, and there's poverty. And I actually went there, and it was pretty normal. Like, it wasn't. You go to a place like Abidjan in Cote d'Ivoire, and they've got skyscrapers. You get in a taxi, you go to the supermarket, you buy some food, you come back to the flat and eat it. Watching the big widescreen TV and going on the internet. They live a very similar life to people everywhere else in the world. So it made me appreciate common humanity, and I wish that I could sort of transfer my experiences to other people in an effective way that would stop them thinking that the world's out to get them. And if people come from other countries, they must be bad, because only bad people travel from one country to another, which is unfortunate at the moment, a line that politicians like to trot out. What Guinness World Records did you achieve? Well, I've got the fastest time to visit all countries by public surface transport, which is 4 years and 31 days. And that was achieved by Graham Hughes, me, on between the 1st of January 2009 and the 31st of January 2013. And the other record I've got is for the first year of my travels, and it's the most countries visited in 1 year without flying, and that record stands at 133, which, could be beaten. It could be beaten. I spent a lot of time trying to get to islands. I spent a lot of time trying to get to Cape Verde Islands and trying to get around the Caribbean and trying to get to Comoros and off Comoros. So if you skip the islands and just go for countries that are attached to other countries, I reckon you could beat that. I reckon I could beat that if I did it again. Is it true that Guinness did not want to recognize your first entry into Russia? Yes, I've already answered that. No one had ever managed to cross the entire country by land vehicles before. Not that we know of. I mean, going to every country. If they had done it, it hadn't been recorded. And I think in the past it would have been a lot more difficult, because places like Kyrgyzstan, you weren't allowed to go there, but then it was part of the USSR. So maybe it was easier in the past because there were fewer countries. I suppose in the 1970s, there was only, 159 countries or something. So it would have been slightly easier in some ways, but then in other ways, in terms of, what was available to get you from A to B, it might not have been. And I also appreciate the fact that I started in 2009 and 2010, and I did the bulk of my traveling in those 2 years, the bulk of the countries that I visited in those first 2 years. And that was very lucky, because if I tried to do that 2 years later, it would have been in the middle of the Arab Spring, and Libya would have been out. I wouldn't have been able to go to Syria. Yemen would have been a no-no. So I managed to time it magically, perfectly right. I don't know how. I didn't do it on purpose. It just happened to happen this way. But it was like this brief spell of kind of peace before, between the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan, and between the Arab Spring and ISIS rising up. There was this little window of opportunity. I see it as being able to visit all these places. What do you do after the Odyssey? I won an island in a game show called Ginger Island, Jinja. You can look it up. How did you get the idea for the book? Well, the book's just me rewriting my blog entries that I had when I was traveling. What do you do now? I'm a YouTuber. I've got a channel called Politics Social, where I talk about politics online each day. I'd like to do travel, but it's too expensive to do travel stuff that actually gives you the money that you need to make YouTube videos. Are you thinking about a new adventure? Always thinking about a new adventure. I've got so many adventures that I would absolutely love to go on. So many challenges that I'd like to set myself. But at the moment, it's just not practical. I'm in the UK. My dad's not well, and I've got family commitments here in the UK. So I intend to go on a new adventure. It just might not be for a few years yet. How has your vision of the world changed after visiting so many countries? Well, I think I've answered that already, but I see the world as a much more friendly, giving, generous, and a safer place than I think I thought it was before I started traveling. I mean, obviously, I thought that it was going to be okay. I didn't go into this thinking I was going to die. But I just think that if you go into any given situation, one of the things I learned, okay, so to put this all into context, right? The one major thing I learned from this journey, if one massive takeaway was this: just keep smiling, okay? Just no matter what happens, just try and keep a sense of humor about it. I feel like the first 6 months of this journey, I was really het up. I kept on missing connections, that things were cancelled. There was a shipping timetable, but it was from 2 years ago, and the ship wasn't operating anymore. And I found myself getting more and more frustrated, because I was trying to do it all in 1 year at the time, and I'd sort of staked, everything that I had on doing this adventure. And then once I realized that I wasn't going to be able to do it in 1 year, and just, took a deep breath and just started enjoying myself, just started having a really good time. And that's when the adventure kind of changed for me and became less of a less of what's the right word for it? Less of a it wasn't really a difficult challenge at the end of the day. I mean, if you're someone like me and you enjoy traveling and you enjoy meeting new people and you enjoy waking up somewhere new every day and you enjoy working out how to get from one place to the next, if you enjoy doing those things, it's a bit like doing a jigsaw puzzle. Like, if you enjoy doing jigsaw puzzles are great. If you don't enjoy them, it's going to be a nightmare. So it was a bit like that. But I realized after I'd been in jail in Congo that one of the reasons why I would been put in jail was that I wasn't nice to the police when they pulled me over. I was sarcastic with them. I was angry. I was like, mate, I was supposed to be meeting up with my couch surf contacts. They were going to take me out for a pizza. We were going to watch a movie. They had all this stuff set up, and I'm pulled over at the side of the road. They're trying to go through all my tapes, and I've got like 10 tapes, 10 hours of tapes, and we're trying to fast forward viewing them all. And I just couldn't be bothered with it. And so I was quite rude. And that ended up with me being in jail for 6 days. So I learned at that point, like, just kick back, Graham. Just don't take it so seriously, and just have a good time. Don't worry unduly about what's going to happen down the road. Just enjoy, where you are. And it always comes back to this amazing quote from my favorite video game of all time, Grim Fandango, which is that no one knows what's waiting at the end of the line, so we might as well enjoy the trip. So there you go. Yeah. Last question here is, do you think traveling can transform a person? Yes, absolutely. It transformed me. I mean, the person that I was in the past is not the person I am now, and a lot of that is informed by my travels and the people I've met, the conversations I've had, and seeing that life isn't that much different anywhere in the world. And also, it's given me a feeling of connectivity with everything that's going on in the world. When something bad happens in Papua New Guinea or in Liberia or in, I don't know, in Vietnam, I I I can associate with that place. I've probably been there. You know, when there was an awful earthquake a few years ago in Nepal. You know, I knew that place. I know people in Nepal. I know people who live there. I have got Nepalese friends. So all that was, that makes me feel more when bad things happen around the world. I'm more concerned now because it doesn't feel like I'm reading a news story about people I don't know in a place that I've never been. It feels more visceral to me now. It feels more real. And the world feels more like a real place. But yeah, I've definitely changed since I started traveling. So that's it. That's all my answers. Woof! That took a long time. Anyway, thanks for that. Okay, right. I'm just going to jump into the chat for a few moments. For any latecomers, he's answering 57 preset questions about his world tour. Any super chats will be answered at the end. You didn't get any super chats, so I don't have to answer any of your questions. FBL, have a beer. Is this a self-promotion video or something great? No, I needed to do a recording today answering all these questions, and I thought if I do it as a live stream, then you can watch along. Because I've got to film this anyway. Well, record it. I'm probably just going to give it as an audio thing, but yeah, imagine writing all that. transcribe it. What else have we got in here? Even in all, I for one won't be flying anywhere near USA for the foreseeable future, says Jane Lockwood. Don't blame you. Honestly, I would not be flying into America. I've got a friend who's an air stewardess. I'm really concerned because they fly into America all the time, which is, sucks. I just got here. Imagine that you should write a book joke that's been made at least 7 times by now. Indeed. How many decades will it take to rebuild Ukraine? Says Bonkers Broncos. It could be rebuilt in a few years if people put their mind to it. Look at Notre Dame. Notre Dame Cathedral. They rebuilt it like double quick time. When the money and the energy and the enthusiasm is there, we as humans can move mountains. The problem is that who's gonna, I want Ukraine to rebuild. Obviously, once this horrific invasion is over, obviously we all want Ukraine to rebuild. But I hope that there is political savvy enough for rich countries around the world to come together and help Ukraine achieve that. Because we find time and time again, whenever there's a war and we help one side, whether it was the, Mujahideen fighting against the Taliban in Afghanistan or against the Russians, against the Soviets in Afghanistan in the 1980s, we helped them out. We gave them weapons. We gave them training, secretly. And then at the end of the war, we just left them. We left an entire population. Young kids who had known nothing but war. We didn't build any hospitals. We didn't build any schools. We didn't build any infrastructure. And what do you expect was going to happen? The whole place fell apart. You had a group of angry young men who had access to weapons, who had been traumatized because they've already been lived through an invasion, and the whole place descended into civil war. A civil war that the fucking Taliban won. So, I really hope that this time we do the sensible thing. Because every time we sort of ignore a country that is asking for help, I'm not saying to just go in because we need to democratize places, that's not what we do. That's not what we should do, sorry. But, helping countries that ask for help, I think should be absolutely 100% the way we do things. Which jail cell was the nicest? Well, the one in Congo they had blood all over the walls, but it was big, I guess. And I got some wet foam, some like moist foam to lie on. I didn't get that in Cape Verde. It was a very small room. It was smaller than this room, and there were 10 of us, no, 11 of us crammed in there like sardines, are sleeping on the concrete floor. Jail cells are not nice. No, they are not. And Philip says, you'll see it's all the show. Keep them laughing as you go. Just remember that last laugh is on you. Yeah, okay, well, that's it. I'm going to go. I'm going to have some din-dins. Kind of hungry now. To be fair, the West couldn't help Afghanistan. After the first occupation, it was still under the influence sphere of the Soviet Union. Well, yeah, but don't forget they pulled out in 1988, and then the Soviet Union had collapsed within a few years. So, in the early 90s, they could have done more. Somalia, I always think of Somalia. The government in Somalia collapsed in 1991, and we could have helped. We could have helped out, but we chose not to. And as a result of that, we got ended up with Somali pirates. Leaving problem areas to fester and not working with the local people in those areas to make the places better is always a mistake. Because we share this planet. This is the thing that I don't think that people like Trump and Erdogan and Melli in Argentina, I don't think they understand it. They can't get it through their heads. We share a planet. It's the only one. It's the only life we'll ever know is on this planet. You travel outside this planet, and it is death in every direction for light years, with millions of miles in every direction. It is just death. There is no life. There is nowhere we can survive that's sustainable. You got these dickheads going, we're going to occupy Mars. No, we're not. Guarantee we're not going to occupy Mars, because we don't even occupy the oceans in this country, on this planet. Why would we occupy somewhere where we're going to be bombarded with radioactive waves all the time? Because they don't have a molten core, so based on or an ozone layer. So good luck not getting cancer. That's all I can say. I agree. You just say it wasn't easy. Yeah, it's not easy. It's not always easy, but then life isn't, And who said it was? Who told you life was easy? They lied. Anyway, I'm going to be back at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, bright and early, for an edition of Morning Brew. So please come along for our first 9 o'clock edition of Morning Brew tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, not 9:30, 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock till 10 o'clock, and we'll be talking about all the shit that's going on in the world. It was kind of nice to talk about something else. It was nice to talk about the nice things of the world. And now I'm thinking of like all the anecdotes and all the funny things that happened to me on my journey that I didn't actually say during the interview section there. But there you go. Whew. Okay, so thanks very much for watching, and thanks for the chat. Sorry I didn't get to read all your messages, but I hope I inspired some people, maybe, or just entertained you for an hour. And then I just want to say until next time, give us a like on the way out, if you'd be so kind. And until next time, I'll say hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.